So, Chris, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, as am I. So, for those of you who have never heard of Chris Spurvey before, he is going to be talking right up my alley because he talks about sales for the people who aren't salesmen or saleswoman, salesperson. And so I'm super excited about that. With that being said, Chris, could you give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got into doing what you're doing currently?
Yeah, well, I could go. I sometimes jokingly refer to myself as Chris Spurvey 9.0 because we're always in a constant state of reinvention. And one night after I had a bottle of wine drank, I decided to reverse engineer my entire life story and came to the point where I was 9.0. So anyway, no, I mean, if I go back, perhaps I'll just focus in on the sales aspect of it. Graduated university and started a company with a really good friend of mine, and this was back in the early 1990s. One of the first web development companies where I live, and began because I had the business hat. Having graduated with a commerce degree, I was designated the salesperson for the company, and I had never sold a thing in my life, right? And I wasn't wired for sales because I had been exposed to kind of that in-your-face objection fighting machine, Electrolux vacuum cleaner salesman way back in the 1980s. So that's what I thought sales was.
Exactly.
So when I was given this sales hat for my first company, I fell flat on my face. I failed miserably. So ultimately, I had to learn to sell in a way that was more authentic and genuine for me, which is flipping that whole equation to be more focused on the customer than me as the seller. But if I just bring that story forward, I built and sold a number of companies, and one of them was an IT consulting company that we grew to 70 or so employees. We sold that in 2013 to KPMG. And it was with KPMG that I really honed in on this understanding that most people aren't wired for sales. So that's what led me to write my book called It's Time to Sell, Cultivating the Sales Mindset, which ultimately led to me doing what I'm doing today, which is helping services-based companies grow in a way whereby they can focus on their expertise and feel good about their expertise, and they can grow the business through selling, but selling in a way that feels good for them.
So what's the number one thing that you would say we're doing wrong I would describe myself as an extreme introvert. And when it comes to sales, most of the times people buy from me because they know I own the business. But if I was a salesperson at a company, I would fail miserably because I'm not a salesman.
Yeah, well, so there's actually a lot of research on this. There's a really good book out there by Daniel Pink called To Sell is Human. And if I just rely on maybe his research, the research in that book says that, a lot of people have this mindset that you have to be extroverted. You used the word introvert. You had to be extrovert in order to be able to sell because they see sales as being something it's in your face. It's pushing versus pulling. But the reality of it is the top producers are on a scale of 1 to 10, where a 1 is an introvert and a 10 is an extrovert. The best results-oriented sales people are a 3.7 on that scale. And the term that they used was that Daniel Pink uses is they're ambiverts, meaning they have a little bit of introvert and maybe certain aspects of their personality. There might be an extrovert element to it. But ultimately, ambiverts are the best because they're most skilled at attuning. And the way I would describe attunement is they're good at listening. They're good at asking questions. They're good at using their intuition to tap into somebody's energy and solve problems, right? So what I would say to you, because what you said is right up my alley. You're actually a phenomenal salesperson and by just taking what you said and by just being who you are and asking questions, listening, problem solving, being curious. That's all selling really is. That's all it should be. And the results show that's all it should be.
Yeah. So that's a good point that you bring up because when I go into a house with intentions of when preconceived notions about the situation, I fail miserably. But when I go into a
Mm,
house and I ask questions and I show empathy, I show that I care, and I'm like, what is your real concerns? I know you wanted this, like, I want you said that you want a system just like what's in the house now. Well, currently your system's a 10 SEER system. We can't even put in anything lower than a 14 SEER. So we're going to start off with something a little bit better, but what is your real concern? And then as I
yes.
dive into their true concerns, like, oh, well, my daughter's bedroom is always a few degrees warmer.
Right.
And that's the only room we don't have a ceiling fan. So maybe that's the problem. And, like, I'll go through a full, diagnosis of the system and come, and on that particular one I'm thinking of, I came to the determination that the ductwork, it was the farthest from the air handler, the indoor unit. It was the smallest ductwork. For some reason, they ran too small of a ductwork when they built the house. And so we were able to make some adjustments there and even put in some dampers. And so talking to her, we were able to add more value to that system. So
Yeah, the word you used at the start of that was preconceived. I believe you said
yeah,
you judge. When you do that, you're only looking through your eyes.
yeah,
The best to be good at sales and to be good at solving these problems, you really have to learn to look through the client's eyes. And you know what? You'll never get it 100% right, but even
yeah,
if it's the trying that leads to the energy of empathy, which you referred to, which is ultimately people make the decision to buy based on how they feel. They make the decision to buy based on how much they feel they can trust you and that you have their best interest in mind. And that decision actually happens really quickly. It happens really quickly on the front end of a relationship being formed.
hmm,
And then what they do once they make the decision to buy um, based on how they feel, they then go and try to justify the decision logically, and the logic is in the features and the benefits, or the features of your
yeah,
product or the features that you're portraying, like costs and so on. But
mhm,
I have a saying that for every door that closes, traditional sales training focuses on the closing. For every door that closes, though, it first has to be opened. And if you're in the service business, the human to human business, you got to focus, in my opinion, 95% of the effort needs to be just focused on the open, because that's where the feeling is created.
that's a really good point. And I've been told that your first impressions happen within matters of seconds.
Seconds,
Yeah.
seconds. Yeah.
So um, I would say that in our situation, my easiest sales, my easiest closes always happen whenever we gave a over the top experience prior to me even arriving.
Yeah,
And
you were
so
responsive. You were on time, timely, and so on.
yeah, and even like sending text notifications the night
Yep.
before to
Yep.
remind you, hey, we have an appointment at 4 p.m. tomorrow. And then whenever I dispatched out to that call, it sent a notification with a Uber link type style link so they could track where I'm at, so they knew when I was going to
Absolutely.
get there. And
Absolutely.
so, and then the conversation on the phone being a very pleasant conversation instead of it being a hassle, like you're an inconvenience for us to come out to see you.
That's right.
Um, but the
Yeah,
ones
you
where
got it.
we're rushed
Mm.
and you can sense it in the phone conversation, I feel like that those are the ones that we have a harder time closing.
Yeah, 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 and I mean, we are dealing with humans, and humans. There's a lot of variety in humans, and
Yeah.
as business owners, as sellers, as service-based people, we just need to realize we're dealing with human beings. So you can't win everybody.
Hmm.
So there's going to be personalities that are just not in alignment. I believe we live on frequencies, right? And we are attracted to people who are roughly on the same frequency as us. So, and maybe I'll just make note that the best salespeople are ones that can adjust to the frequency of the buyer,
Okay.
and can, and it's where intuition is so important.
Hmm.
You got to be intuitive enough to know the type of person you're talking to and be able to adjust your pace and so on to that person. I don't want to make it sound too complicated, but that ultimately is what makes you good at selling. And it's uh, um, research and learning and technique is only a certain brings you a certain way for a
Yeah.
certain distance. The rest of it is putting yourself into it, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm really passionate about this.
I can tell. So,
Yeah.
uh, will we be able to see some of that instruction in the book, in your book?
No. So here's what. Yeah. So yes, but what I will say about my book is it's really a foundation setting book, and maybe I can just describe it to you.
Yeah. Do it.
Uh, I go back in my story. We started off a little bit about me. There was a book in my life that had a monumental impact. We talked about books before we hit record.
Yeah.
The Signal versus Noise. Well, one book in my younger years was a key piece of signal, and it was called The Greatest Networker. It was a book, and it was written in a narrative format.
That's awesome.
It was written by a gentleman by the name of John Milton Fogg. And what a book that's written in a narrative format does is it changes the image on the screen of our mind. So I used to view networking as something you did by going into these large events and going around with business cards and sweaty palms and
Mm-hmm.
so on. The Greatest Networker changed it. It changed the image. And I said to myself, if I ever make it, quote unquote, make it, I'm going to write a book that's a narrative and that changes the image on the screen of the mind. So my book is called It's Time to Sell, Cultivating the Sales Mindset. And it's a narrative. It's my narrative as to how I came to this point with sales, where I'm very comfortable with it, and I see it as a pull versus a push. So that's the book. And so I get immense feedback on it, and it's for the exact reason I just described. It changes the image of sales.
Yeah, and I love that whole aspect of the narrative style, like the what is it? The five.
Five dysfunctions of a team.
Yes, the
Yeah.
five dysfunctions of a team.
Yeah.
That book took for me, that took the narrative to a whole nother level, between that book and The Millionaire Next Door.
That's right.
Those two books really, like, I was like, I got so much more out of those two books, which was really awesome.
Yeah. Another one that comes to mind as I hear you say that, and I'm not sure how popular it is in the United States, but because I'm in Canada, The Wealthy Barber by David Chilton. Basically, it's a really good book to give to younger people to get them of the mindset of saving, and how saving when you're young can have a monumental compounding effect as you get older, versus being 46 like I am right now, and only starting now, say, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that book is another really good one.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. I know we don't want to extend out time too much. We have some other things going on, but I truly appreciate everything. And your book is, how do we get that? And is it just is it audio or just in print?
Yeah, it's no, it's not audio. I've been thinking a lot about actually creating an audio version, because where it is a narrative. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that. But right now, no, it's not audio. It can be found on my website, chrisspurvey.com, with all the links there to Amazon and Barnes and Noble and so on. Or they can just go to Amazon directly.
Okay.
In terms of social media, I'm extremely active on LinkedIn. So
Okay.
if you're on LinkedIn, look me up. I'd love to connect with you.
Absolutely. And also, you have a podcast.
Yeah, It's Time to Sell. Same title as the book. Yeah.
That's easy enough.
Yeah, man. I think I'm episode 170. I'd actually like to have you on my podcast.
Absolutely. I love it. So I appreciate you coming on the show, and I will put links to all of this. And if anybody has any questions, be sure to reach out to Chris. And I'm super stoked. The thing is like I'm, like I said before, I'm an introvert, but I would probably say that I'm probably at the 3.7 ish range there. So
I can tell by talking to you.
Hope.
So. Yeah. No, I can tell by talking to you that you're actually a very powerful salesperson, and perhaps you can take it you can make a quantum leap in your life by just embracing who you are, and realize that's how you sell. Just basically doing what you're doing. Maybe you just need to do a little bit more of it.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you bring up, because I forced myself to get in front of people. So talking about networking, you can network yourself to death in Savannah,
Mm.
Georgia. Like there's networking every single day of the week, and there's probably 3 or 4 events every single evening, and then several during the day. So I limited myself to Tuesdays and Thursdays only for networking, but now I'm the president of the Small Business Chamber, and have been. So I have to get up every single month and talk in front of a couple hundred people,
That's
and
outstanding.
then same with the buy local board. And so I forced myself into those scenarios where I was uncomfortable to the point to where now I can be more comfortable in my skin. So I used to would have registered myself as like a 1-ish,
Mm.
2-ish maybe, and so since I've done that, I've come out of my shell a little bit, but I still find myself getting nervous whenever it's like face to face with somebody. And it's so funny because we have 10,000 downloads, every month, and people are like, "Oh yeah, you don't like talking to people, but you have all these downloads, all these listeners that listen," and it's like, it's one of those things I can hide behind a microphone.
Yeah, yeah. But you do bring up when I listen to you say that, we are living in a very different time than in, let's just say, 30 years ago or 20 years ago, when selling was something you had to interrupt people.
Yeah.
In today's world, we have an opportunity as introverts to share our expertise in different ways, like a podcast, like articles, publishing on LinkedIn. Some of you might be fortunate, like for me, I was publishing on LinkedIn, and all of a sudden Forbes reached out to me, and then Inc.
Oh,
reached out to me. And I guess my point is that by putting yourself out there and just sharing yourself in multiple ways, you can get to a point where your customers begin to start coming to you. So I look at sales being in kind of 2 pillars. One pillar is the direct outreach, networking, one-to-one
uh-huh.
contact with potential customers. The other way of the second pillar, and I think both pillars had to be worked on at the same time. The second pillar is personal branding, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
But it's ultimately to help to get people coming to you. And the nice thing about growing a personal brand, and I'm a perfect example of it, when they reach out to you and say, "I'm interested in talking to you," when you go into those conversations, it feels like you're already on second base.
Yeah.
Because going back to something we talked about, know, like, and trust, they subconsciously feel like they already know you
Mm-hmm.
because they've heard you, they've listened to your podcast, they've read your article, they visited your website, whatever.
Yeah, I did
So
that by accident. I accidentally built the personal brand,
did
and
you?
yeah, it's really awesome. And it's funny you say that, because like I'm going to AHR Expo tomorrow, and I went to it last year, and I was talking to all these people, and they're talking to me about all of my like all my stuff. They know all about me, and I don't have a
There you go.
clue who these people are. Like, weird, but yeah, cool.
It's cool because you wake up and you say to yourself, "Wow, this is
Yeah.
actually working."
Yeah, 100%. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, awesome
Cool,
stuff.
Chris. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, and I look forward to talking to you again in the near future. And
Yeah.
I'm going to pick up your book and see if I can't get it read while I'm out at AHR Expo.
Fantastic. All right, have a great one.
All right, man. You too. See you later.